Good morning, friends. Lovely, beautiful, sunny morning here in White Salmon on Jewett Creek, the day after the Vaisakha Puja. Beautiful, dynamic conditions here the last couple days, actually. Little rain, little sprinkle, little sun, little fast-moving clouds, uh, moonlight coming, going, changing conditions. So last night was we had another really wonderful talk from Ajahn. I was delighted to see that he returned to the theme of feelings, given the amount of time we have, and the remaining couple sections of the Satipatthana Sutta. I was delighted to see that he came back. There's so much more that really could be said about feelings, and it's a rich field for contemplation and development in our practice. In fact, I was thinking I might just see if I can convince him to give us a whole retreat on feelings. And maybe it could just be on Vedana, but he could maybe broaden it out even beyond that, to encompass just the whole dimension of feeling as we think of it in the West. And he is fond of talking on the emotional life of a practitioner and how so much of the thrust of the Buddha's path of practice is to get us to examine and reform our emotional life for the better. That might be a really nice place to go next year. A whole 10-day Dhamma Fest practice session contemplating Vedana and feelings. So we'll see where that goes. There was a nice coincidence too. Sometimes my friends and my fellow monks and nuns are working on books for so long that one forgets that something's in progress. And I think it was yesterday or maybe just the day before, Birkin sent out an email that Ajahn Sona has a book published. And he's a very good writer, but he doesn't write much. He hasn't published many books. But there's a new book out. If you're not on the Birkin mailing list, perhaps there's something on their website. It's on the theme of emotions and metta bhavana. I think it's a metta and serenity. The title doesn't come to mind right now, but something worthy of investigation. So the talk that Ajahn gave last night, I think is quite rich, and I was a little bit distracted last night. I couldn't catch the very beginning of the talk because the monks had to do some sort of ceremony, so came back to a little bit later, and then the ordinations were going. So I only caught a bit of it last night. Re-listened to the whole thing this morning, and I probably will listen to it one more time today because there's a lot of interesting little threads in his talk last night that I'd just like to kind of revisit. So, and he did say he's going to be moving on, so I don't think he'll be exploring Vedana much more in this retreat. But the talks are there, and it's like part of the benefit of the way we're doing this. You don't just get one shot. If we were sitting in the Birkin Sala and we heard that sort of talk, that would be it. And then sometimes you have to wait a whole another year before the talks are processed and you get a chance to re-listen to them. So, and there's great value in listening to Dhamma talks more than once. I almost always pick up on one or two new little facets or some new little sort of question or insight sort of will come up usually when I come back to revisit a talk. So the other interesting news in our communities and our life is at Abaigiri last night. This is the thing that kept me up to 10 o'clock, way past my bedtime, was ordinations were happening at Abaigiri. Anagarika Josh, who this is his second time around. I can't remember how many years ago he was an Anagarika, and then life situation wasn't suitable for him to ordain at that time. And he's returned to the community, trained as an Anagarika, and last night he went forth as a Samanera, as a novice monk in our monastery, and was given the name Yaso. And sometimes just hearing it, I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced or spelt. Yaso, though. So we have Samanera Yaso now. And then Aaron Remington, who was a monk in our community for many years, Titapo Bhikkhu, returned to take up the training again of being a monk at Abaigiri, and he went forth last night as an Anagarika, along with another fellow named Dave, who's been at Abaigiri for a while. So there's one new novice and two new monastics to the community there at Abaigiri, and it was wonderful to see. So we have a good crowd here this morning. It's really good to see that this is a meaningful part of people's morning. Good way to begin the day. Hopefully you get some meditation in before coming for this, and I'm sure most of you do. And then it's nice to kind of check in with friends and reflect a little bit before heading into the rest of our day, our duties, our schedule. And I know from just looking at the names, most of you are spending these days on the retreat. So that's wonderful. Let's go to reflections and questions here. Let's see. Not sure where the sound effects are going, but sound effects to start the question period. I do have Skype open if somebody wants to give me a call, and we're off to a good start this morning. We have time, but let's go to a question from Debbie here. As I steer the grand Wurlitzer of my streaming software. Good morning, all. Incredible talk by Ajahn Sona, and I so appreciate Ajahn Sudanto's coffee and tea recaps. Oh. Thank you, Debbie. I think that was the wrong one. I thought I saw a question from Debbie here. That must be further down the stream. I saw a couple questions come up around feeling. Okay, well, I'll go to Ruby, and if there was one above Ruby's question here, maybe you can resubmit it. Good morning, Ajahn. Could you say more about what Ajahn Sona said about being to detach and observe physical discomfort, but not emotional discomfort? That is the attachment. Yeah, I've heard him make this point before, and listening to it last night, there was a little question in my mind, so there's probably more for me to investigate and understand about the point that he's making there. Most often when I hear him make this point, I think he's trying to counter a lot of misinformation out there, and maybe people's overconfidence. People tend to overestimate just what it would mean to detach and be free from afflictive emotions. And there is some sort of sense of being able to sort of move outside oneself and to look at something from an objective vantage or viewpoint I think the point that Ajahn is making, and this is backed up by the theory of the Dhamma, but also like if you investigate deeply what's going on in the mind, um, when there's emotional discomfort, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're full of doubt, sadness, depression, you are attached. And this is a point that Ajahn likes to emphasize again and again. There's a much fuller and much greater opportunity um, to sort of resolve that and to overcome that than merely sort of moving to this what feels like a more objective vantage point. Like, what you're starting to arouse is sati. Like there's an awareness that you're angry, which is good because there's a lot of states of anger that go on unrecognized, even fairly profound expressions of anger go unrecognized in a person. And of course, there's a whole other range of emotions, both positive and more importantly, negative emotions that we don't recognize with mindfulness. But, one can have enough mindfulness to be aware that I'm in the grips of frustration or anger or confusion or some sort of delusory state of mind, and yet not really have resolved it or be free from it. And so, I think the point that Ajahn's making there is really to encourage people to take that to heart and sort of, he's always encouraging you, ask more from your practice. There's more. There's more than just merely creating a little sense of objectivity and mindfulness around experiencing negative emotions. And if we reflect on the Buddha's encouragement and instruction in the teachings on right effort, he says, this is to be resolved. And he uses even stronger language, it says to be done away with. So it needs to be dissipated and resolved to fully kind of accomplish the practice. And the point that Ajahn made last night, and I've heard him make many times over and over again, is like, if you are experiencing anger, you are attached. Like, you can't have anger without attachment. And that goes for all of the afflictive emotions that the Buddha singles out. Now, how that relates to his point about physical discomfort, there's a certain amount of physical discomfort that we can call maybe natural dukkha. And this is not Ajahn's words, and it's not even the Buddha's words, but it's just a way to maybe contemplate and reflect on this. It is possible to be experiencing dukkha vedana, and Ajahn made the point that even the Buddha experienced dukkha vedana, painful feelings, physical discomfort. If one still has a body and one is still present in the sense realm, the very nature of sense contact brings us into the experience of painful, pleasant, and neutral feelings. And that's just the natural order of things. And when one squares themselves away with that and grows an acceptance and understanding of the nature of sense contact, then one can become detached. The concept I use for reflecting on this is divested. You divest in sense contact as being a refuge or being your strategy for happiness and well-being in the world. And that doesn't mean that you're apathetic or oblivious to sort of physical comfort and discomfort, but you're no longer looking to that, and you're no longer attached. You're no longer needing and feeding on that dimension of experience for your emotional well-being. Um, so, that is something that we really can grow and sort of develop through an exploration and understanding of the limitations of sense contact, and through a profound understanding of this uh, aspect of Vedana. One can be detached from that. It's like there's some pain in the body, and it can be even very profound pain in the body. And when one just accepts um, that is the natural order of having a body and being in the world, one need not create suffering around that. It need not make one sad. It need not make one frustrated or confused or angry or any of the other afflictive emotions. Um, it need not be the seed or the cause for an arousing of pity, which is something that comes up oftentimes. Like, we feel unlucky when we meet painful sensations, when we get sick, um, when the various ailments of the body are dogging us. Sometimes we move into, it constellates the self. Why me? As if other people don't experience this, other beings don't experience this, um, which is kind of funny. I mean, we always tend to sort of think other people don't suffer like we suffer. Uh, Trust me, they suffer every bit as much. Um, no one gets out of this for free. So I think I saw something else here. I hope that kind of helps stimulate a little more contemplation of that, Debbie. Oh, you did have a follow-up here. Ajahn Sudanto said you can detach from physical pain but not emotional. Is this the practice of feeling emotional disturbances in the body? Part of a way of dealing with them? I mean, yeah, so this is speaking to the question Ruby had. And I mean, there's many different ways that you can deal with them. Sometimes just coming to sort of feel emotional disturbance in the body can be a way of at least stepping outside of that sense of self-pitying and the whole story that one often generates in the presence of dukkha. And I have a really interesting hypothesis or theory that's, I think, worthy of investigation. And that's like part of the story of self, part of our habits of selfing, uh, are our attempt to wrestle with dukkha vedana and explain dukkha vedana. And I won't go into it. I just kind of offer that up as something that people might contemplate. And it's like, we're sensitive to the fact that we're suffering, not just in grand ways, but even in very sort of subtle ways. There's this thread of discontent that's there in our life, and it feels wrong. Like, it just feels wrong, and it feels like there's something is missing. It feels like there's a sense of lack. There's a sense that the world is out of alignment. There's a missing piece. And I think the awareness of that, even maybe what we might call a very dim subconscious awareness of that, plays a critical role in the stories that we tell ourselves and the habits of selfing. So I find, there's different skillful means that one can uh, develop and explore that help us kind of step out at least of that way of meeting sort of dukkha. And sometimes just being with the physical experience in the body of an emotion, we can easily classify that as this first satipatthana of feeling the body. I mean, it's like maybe an afflictive emotion or a feeling kind of comes up, and it can be a very skillful means just to go to the felt sense in the body, and then like pay attention to the sensation of it as a way of breaking the proliferation, breaking the habits of identification. But also you're then sort of replacing unskillful, unwise attention with wise and skillful attention. And that can be the tool to then dissolve and bring to a resolve that emotional distress or that sort of state of suffering. So, let's see, Linda, I have a similar question to others as to being detached with psychological feelings. How does equanimity tie in with that? Well, equanimity is yet another quality of heart that one can evoke and arouse as a skillful means to deal with psychological feelings or emotional distress. It's that wise movement to remind yourself to chill out. You find yourself getting all dramatic and creating an inflated sense of importance or generating these negative stories I'm talking about. And then, when one realizes that you're just inflicting yourself with the second arrow, creating compounded dukkha, extra layers of suffering and unskillful reactions around it, one can just encourage oneself to chill out, relax, don't be so dramatic. It's just suffering, the arising of suffering, the ceasing of suffering. And if one has cultivated this strength of heart that the Buddha encourages us to do in the path, and one is skilled in equanimity, that becomes a great asset for sort of dealing with psychological feelings and afflictive emotions, including very powerful ones. One can just evoke that sense of equanimity and start to dissipate and resolve some sort of unskillful, afflictive mind state through this kind of just movement to equanimity. Nothing special is going on, is what I like to tell myself. It's just the rising of suffering. This too shall pass. There's various ways that we can sort of reflect that are in alignment with the Dhamma that move us to that position of equanimity. And let's see, follow-up question about not detaching from... So, and allowing on about the question about not detaching from psychological pain, does that mean that the second arrow only applies to physical pain? No, my understanding, and just even from listening to Ajahn talk last night, he was talking about the second arrow being the psychological pain. So the first arrow is, what we might kind of talk about as the natural dukkha, like the pain of the body or the irritation of sense contact. Something that is unsightly, ugly, dissonant, terrible sounding, like the leaf blower. It's dukkha vedana. Like, there's all these sensations that are suffering, and pain in the body is pain in the body. It's unpleasant touch sensation. That's the first arrow. The frustration, the aversion, the impatience, the self-pity, that's the second arrow. And, in reality, there's usually far more than a second. There's a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth. Morning, Wayne. I was reminded of a teaching on persistence and especially patience in my practice. Well, yeah, persistence. There's this Buddhist concept of adhitthana, or determination, which is maybe what you're reflecting on there. Ability to persist in the face of difficulties, persist in the face of dukkha vedana is important. If we're pleasure-centric and we're over-invested in pleasant sensations and minimizing painful sensations, then the mind is just very fickle, and it maybe doesn't develop a very heightened sense of resolve to bear with. And this just isn't around delayed gratification. This is also in line with a lot of the encouragement that the Buddha gave his disciples in how to deal with that which is difficult. Like, there's all these passages in the suttas where the monks were sick, and they didn't have the kind of medical system that we have today and the various interventions and drugs and whatnot. And like most of humanity, they had to have heightened powers of bearing with and just persisting and being patient with. And the Buddha sort of praised, and like there's suttas where he talks about how to be a good patient and how to be a good caregiver. And in the instructions of how to be a good patient, he says, one bears with painful feeling and what is difficult to bear. And there's several suttas where something very similar comes up, and he just praises people that are patient and persistent in the face of difficulty. There's more to be said about that, but we're moving up to 8:30, so I'm just going to scan the rest of the comments, and then we'll move on with our day. Sarima, gratitude for the retreat. Thank you for sharing that. And Holly, I love your new logo, California Poppies. Thank you. I like to see these beautiful, inspiring icons here. So your comments on Vedana, body, and mind, how one handles them differently. Well, I think there was a lot of that already. So we're running out of time. A few more appreciations here. Ajahn, I'm getting immense insight from you and Ajahn Sona. Especially appreciate the focus on right effort as something I can always depend on. That's good to hear, Phil. Right effort doesn't get enough airplay. And for those of you who haven't heard the retreat from last year, those talks are worth revisiting again and again. Ajahn, you use the phrase strength of heart frequently. Would you elaborate on it? Well, it's a very sloppy, colloquial phrase that I came up with. And essentially what I mean by it is, one has developed the kind of virtues and values that the Buddha praises. And there's different ways. It's a kind of global shorthand for the skillful heart, or having developed kusala. But, I also think of it like as one has the strength to overcome the hindrances, which are the nutriments of defilements. So strength of heart means one has enough fitness in their practice and in their mind that they can easily overcome greed and ill will and anger and frustration, sloth and torpor, doubt, restlessness. So that's what I think of as strength of heart. And if one has an ability to overcome those things on a regular basis, then one has access to these bojjhangas, these factors of awakening. So, and one has access to lucidity and serenity and joy and happiness and equanimity. So, okay, well, it is 8:30. Good to see you all, friends. And I'm glad everyone is enjoying the retreat. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Even if it's pouring down rain where you are, ideal. The sun will shine tomorrow, or maybe the next day, or someday. Everything is always changing and impermanent. So have a good day, friends. And we'll have another day of practice here. And tea time Q&A at 4 p.m. And another talk from Ajahn tonight. I think he'll be moving on to the contemplation of the mind, or mindfulness of mind states tonight. So that should be very interesting to start to explore with him. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Have a good day.